Everyone, thank you so much for being here with us for this very, very urgent and important discussion. We have an increased sense of urgency behind what's going on with Black women in the United States today. Over the past few months, it just seems as if every news cycle, at every turn, there was another attack on a Black woman's expertise, accomplishments, or character. And in spite of that, we continue to excel professionally and rise to positions of power. And even as we do that, here they come again with more relentless attacks, seeking to reverse the progress of women of color. So as we go about trying to forge a path forward, we do need to have a conversation about this and try to get at what we as women can do about it. So with that, I would like to take a moment to introduce our esteemed panel of experts. Lord knows sisters know how to be experts at this sort of thing. And I don't think we could have done better than this selection of experts to talk about what's happening with Sisters Under Siege. First up, we have Prince George's County State's Attorney, Aisha Braveboy. We have Glynda Carr, president of Higher Heights, which is at the intersection of the progress for Black women in politics. And we have Dr. Kaye Whitehead from the Karson Institute to give us perspective on what this can mean for us in the mental health space. So thank you, ladies, so much for being here and having this conversation with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
One thing I would like to get right into is this notion. There's some data that we have from a pretty recent McKinsey study that talks about, although this was Black women in the corporate space, we are talking about Black women across disciplines and just dealing with our presence in society. 20% of Black women leaders have experienced having somebody say or imply that you're not qualified for what you do, compared to 12% of all women or 6% of all men. 38% of us have experienced being mistaken for someone at a lower level, compared to 26% for all women and 13% for all men. And one fact that we can really get into here, 55% of us have experienced having our judgment questioned as we go about what we do, compared to 39% for all women and 28% for all men, I'm sorry. And we have ranked dead last when it comes to manager support in the workplace. Is it any wonder that we, of all people, are quite seasoned and experienced in dealing with being under siege in the law, in politics, in mental health space, in the workplace? So throwing a question just out to our panel at large. Are any of you surprised when we see attacks like what we have seen over the past 2 months, from the resignation of Dr. Claudine Gay as president of Harvard University up through the pretty attention-grabbing and thrill-a-minute hearing in Atlanta last week with the testimony of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis in the election interference trial of Donald Trump?
Over 10 years ago, I sat in a Brooklyn cafe with our co-founder of Higher Heights, Kimberly Peeler Allen, two, Black women working in the political space. At that time, in 2011, we found ourselves in rooms that were mostly male and mostly Black, right? I was always one of the youngest women in those rooms. And I think, this is not generationally, we've heard our mothers and grandmothers having similar experiences, regardless of if it was in their office space or in community spaces that people questioned our qualifications and our ability to be in a space. We assumed over 10 years ago, that if we did our jobs right, our goal was to ensure that Black women are in every room and at every table, that the very room that we were trying to dismantle and change, that those in those original rooms will be threatened by our leadership. And so I think we saw it coming, that there's a rise of the number of Black women in academic settings. There's a rise in Black women in elected leadership. There's a rise of Black women in corporate rooms. There's a rise of Black women who are, receiving advanced degrees. The media is talking about our accomplishments and about our leadership and our power. We're living in some of the politically toxic and racially divisive times of at least my generation. And so covertly, there were people talking about our leadership. People are emboldened now to be able to talk about our leadership on record, on TV, in opinion pieces. And so the question becomes, and I think that's the question of the night, is what do Black women leaders need to do to surround these women and support them in a way that is holding people's commentary to fire?
I'd like to just piggyback on what Ms. Carr said. I mean, I look at it almost as, an intimidation factor. I think Black women, when we do rise to power, when we gain our education and status, it's through hard work, it's through sweat, it's through tears. No one gives us anything. And so those who are concerned about our rise to power are also very intimidated by that power that we wield. They understand that we had to be better than every single person to get it. And so that can be very intimidating for people who want to maintain the status quo. And the way that they deal with it is by undermining us. Because if they can undermine us and get people to believe that we have poor judgment, that we don't know what we're doing, then maybe we won't be as powerful as we are. But I think that the resilience of Black women that I have seen says that that is not true. I mean, it is very tough. Don't get me wrong. I have been questioned numerous times. My judgment, why I have this position, all of those things, the decisions I make in this position, some of which have never been made before. And it is tough sometimes to just deal with the criticism or the questioning. But because we are so resilient, because we have that strength within us, I think that is very intimidating for people because we won't stop. It doesn't stop us from doing the work. It may be challenging at times, but it doesn't prevent us from moving forward.
And so I want to add that I actually think that the figures are a little bit low. I think they're not taking into effect the actual impact of what it means to be undermined in our fields, and what does it mean to have to deal with the constant harassment, the constant second guessing, the constant stress that comes along with what it means to be a Black woman who has ascended to a certain level. I am a full professor, and less than 2% of the full professors in this country are Black women, which means 98% of the field around college campuses is dominated by white men, white women, other people of color, and men as a whole. And so thinking about what that means to be in a space where you have a certain amount of credibility given to you because you are a doctor, you are the top of your field. But when you show up on a campus, particularly at a PWI, the assumption is that you are support staff. And there's nothing wrong with being support staff. I make the argument that we as Black women who are professors, we have to go out of our way to lift up the Black women who are the invisible labor, because we do not rise unless we take other women with us. So to walk around campus and assume that I am something special, I am forgetting that it was my mother who helped clean up a place so that I could get education. I'm also one of only a handful of Black women who solo host a radio talk show. It is a field dominated by white voices. If you leave out of Maryland and drive across the country, you're going to hit white men during the times of the drive time, all the way until you get to California. And then you'll encounter women of color. So all the fields that I am in, it's very rare to see Black women. I think that when we look at the work that's being done, I think we turn the tables a bit and we talk about the actual racial weathering that takes place. Like, I know we are resilient. I understand that, Miss Braveboy. I absolutely agree with you. I know we are tenacious. I know we are hardworking. I like to focus on the price we have to pay to be in these areas because I do think that we are dying a very slow death by forcing ourselves to work so hard in fields that never accept us. That's the racial weathering that I like to talk about and look at all the data that talks about how Black women every day we are losing years off of our life just because we're showing up in these spaces. There is a price to pay, which is why I'm glad Claudine Gay resigned. I'm like, sister, resign, save your mind, save your soul, save your spirit, because it is not worth it to be constantly harassed at that level all the time and never get pieces of yourself back.
Let's explore this racial weathering for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought that up because, especially for our younger women who
Mm-hmm.
are coming into their chosen professions and running right into that buzzsaw of you don't know enough, you're not experienced enough, you are out of place to pursue this particular thing. Right now, while they have that resilience, what are some of the things they can do to prepare, I guess, to weather the
Mm-hmm.
racial weathering? How does that manifest? And should they feel as if they're the only ones going through that?
Well, I'll just put out first, and then, of course, open it up to my sisters, that the weathering hypothesis talks about the accumulation of racial stress over a Black woman's lifetime. And that the argument is that we start dealing with racial weathering even as young girls, because this country tends to age young Black girls. So we may be 10, we may be 12, but we're seen as being 15, 17, and we're treated as if we're young women and we're never afforded the opportunity to have a childhood, to actually be a girl in this society and to be protected in the ways in which white girls are protected. White girls have this kind of infancy stage that they go through. So we all lean out as hard as we can to protect that infancy, whereas Black girls are soon to be women. So you have to work harder, even though you're very young. So this racial weathering takes place, and what you're ending up doing is you're, loosening all of the gene cells you have. They're getting shorter and shorter from the racial weathering. So when we talk about how do we weather the weathering, I think we have to start by thinking about what do we do to lift up and protect Black girls. It has to start there. Because if you are waiting to deal with your weathering when you're 55, when you're 58, when you're 45, actually, you lost a lot of years. And you may be 45 on paper, but through racial weathering, you're really more like 55. So what can you do to begin to protect yourself? What can you do to begin to remove yourself from a field? I don't mean going to work and paying your bills, because we have to do that. But how do you end the emotional attachment to your job? I was talking about this on the radio. You die on Tuesday, they lift you up on Tuesday night, your office is filled on Wednesday. Like, we have learned through COVID that our job is not our life. So how do you build your community around you to build you up, people who love you, who appreciate you, who see you, because that will help to soften the blow of the racial weather. And then we stop eating every crumb they give us just because they've convinced us that we're hungry. I think we work so hard to get into these spaces, and then we get there and we realize that, the shiny knob was really just copper. Like, it's not gold. Even though we thought it was gold and we were willing to sacrifice ourselves for the gold, and it is nothing. I said we stop looking for validation in the fields where white folks exist, because they're expecting us to be so hungry and to work so hard to take everything they give us, because we are tenacious, because we are strong, and because we are assumed to be less than stellar, less than brilliant, less than bright.
It stands to reason that racial weathering has a twin baby cousin in pressures of perfection, where whenever we are performing our roles in society, especially on a national stage, that pressure to be even more perfect at doing this takes a toll. And in turn, our human flaws appear magnified as some mistake we made or somehow we failed to perform. Should we care so much about the allegations of failure to perform? Oftentimes, we're the ones lobbing this at each other too. But should we care so much about failure to perform, especially when you look at what the sisters are dealing with on a national level?
I think that we should feel. I think that's one of the things that I think sometimes we are trained not to show our emotions, not to let things worry us or bother us. But the reality is we are all human. And it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be vulnerable. But I think what we don't have always are those safe spaces in which to really reflect on things that happen to us. You know, the atrocities, the attacks, the things that are not fair. Sometimes we don't have those spaces to really express ourselves because, like in my profession, being the top prosecutor, that means I am the top. There is no one else that is above me that's helping to guide me. I'm the one making the decisions. And I can tell you that, you know, I do sometimes second guess myself. Did I do that right? Because someone was upset that I said things this way and that way. And I had to learn to forgive myself. I am not going to be perfect, and perfection should not be what I strive for. What I should strive for is to be the best person I can be. And that's tough for us because we want people to think that we're perfect, that we made every right decision. Because if we're not that, then we think, well, maybe we're not enough. But we can't allow ourselves to let perfection put us in a position where we are, destroying our own health, our mental well-being, and all of those things. So I've had to learn to forgive myself if I didn't make the right decision, and learn that I don't have to always be at the top of my game. That's unrealistic. Most people are not at the top of their game at all times, and we're just human, and recognize that.
I mean, I think that's what's unique about Black women's leadership in this moment, right? It's a generational thing for many of us. It is the notion that my mother set a bar so high for me, right? So I think there's three things. How are we going into our prayer closets, and our quiet space, about how do we pace ourselves to be, we are the best leaders we can be. I always believe that leaders can grow. Like I'm in a personal leadership growth period in myself. And some of this, speaking to what the state's attorney had said, is like, how do you create grace for yourself about not letting the perfect get in the way of good, when in fact our counterparts aren't even, their bar is on the floor, and we've set a bar so high. How do we create safe, trusted spaces? That's what Higher Heights seeks to do. Our work in our next 10 years is literally creating a space for Black women to have a space where we can be authentically vulnerable, and support one another. So how do we create a space where Black women are supporting Black women? I think, Sonya, you mentioned it, right? We could be our hardest critics. So how are we creating safe spaces among Black women? And I will say at this moment, Black women's leadership across sectors are actively under attack. I'll just name three ways. One, from mis and disinformation. And so our leadership is being targeted in a way that our media and social media outlets are framing our actions in the way that we lead, oftentimes framed in a mis and disinformation way. And frankly, are being funded both domestically and internationally. We are also under attack. Black women have raised their hands in the frame of Higher Heights. We help to elect Black women in political leadership roles that we've asked them to raise their hands, and they're now being harassed, both online. They're being threatened violently. There's a new report out by the Brennan Center, right, that Black elected women and women elected women are feeling under attack, that they don't feel safe. We are in a dangerous space where all the work we've done to recruit, support, and elevate Black women's leadership across sectors, that we're going to see Black women stepping out of that sector, as it relates to Higher Heights. I believe we're going to see Black women deciding not to run for re-election. We're going to see Black women deciding not to run for higher office. And we're going to see Black women deciding not to run for office. And so the work over the last 10 years to elect a record number of Black women up and down the ballot is threatened by the glass house that we have lived in. We've asked to build the political house for Black women. We certainly didn't want that house to be a glass house that is fragile, because this American democracy and this American society continues to not be ready for the leadership that Black women are putting forth.
We see it over here on the other side of the wall, Glynda, as well with political media and Black women's presence in political media. Also, with this notion of, well, she doesn't really understand politics. I'm sure it's happening on with the women chasing office as well. But what good is it for us to be out here in elective office if we don't have us covering us in elective office? And the media are feeling it too. Madam State's Attorney, I am sure you see that in the legal profession, and Dr. Whitehead, I'm sure you see it also in academia. So what?
And Sonya, can I just add, because nor I'm elected or in academia, we see it now in the under attacks of Black women who are running national organizations, right? Mm-hmm. People have asked Black women to run some of the largest historically white institutions in this country. They've inherited an institution and inherited a very large, issue like reproductive rights. And they've stepped into these large institutions and are being criticized about how they're leading these major national organizations.
Is it just me, or does this current wave of this feel different? That there is something a lot more forceful and a lot more sinister behind this normal pressure to perform, pressure to conform, pressure to deliver that we felt through the ages. Somehow this is different, what we're dealing with right now in this post-George Floyd area, right? The era, this pushback on DEI seems to have undergirding it just sort of a wave of harshness, or maybe I'm off base here.
I don't think that it is different. I mean, we're in a post-George Floyd, what I call the Black Lives Matter 2.0. But I know that our sisters from the 19th century were dealing with coming out of American slavery. They were dealing with the post-Dred Scott. They were dealing with the post-Plessy. We had sisters dealing with post-Emmett Till, like this kind of post-moment of dealing with Black trauma and having to figure out how do we navigate and negotiate the moment is something that Black women have historically dealt with. I mean, you think about the early 19th century Black women, the idea that we're going to lift as we climb. And the Alice Dunbar Nelsons, the Mary Church Terrells, who were club women saying we've got to create intentional space. You think about Shirley Chisholm and the idea like I'm going to bring my own folding chair, but no matter what moment that we're in, we're always dealing with the pushback, which is white supremacy, which is mixed with misogyny, which is what Kimberly Crenshaw talks about when she talks about intersectionality. The Black women deal with that at the intersections of both of these pieces that undergird who we are in this society. We deal with white supremacy, we deal with misogyny, and we try to find ways to navigate and negotiate through that. I think that what is different is not the pressure. I think what is different is that we are trying to make more intentional choices around self-care. Like we're trying to carve out more spaces where we can do some intervention work early. Like at some point as Black women in this country, it was selfish to center yourself. It was always about giving more of what you have, whether you were giving it to your children or giving it to your community or giving it to your husband. It's always about giving out, and never being fed. And I'm a product of the Black church. I am a PK, a pastor's kid. My mom was first lady. I have seen what it means to constantly give, and you just never get fed. I think what we have learned in watching our mothers and our grandmothers, in watching the number of Black women, I think of the 2 Black women presidents last year who dropped dead within a week of each other. We've seen with sisters committing suicide from higher education, that we actually have to be more intentional about self-care. We mentioned earlier about the racial weathering, and it's kind of 4 pieces to that. So you have the perceived discrimination, you have the neighborhood or family stress, you have the daily stress, and then you have the professional stress. So you're getting it from all of these spaces, because if you are a wife and a mother, your job, we all know, doesn't stop when you get off. It's just, you just pick up another bag and you continue to work throughout the night, right? You carve out your life in stitches. But as a result of that and the increased cortisol production, Black women deal with heart disease, anxiety, depression, obesity, with 50% more likely to have high blood pressure, with 50% more likely to die of a stroke, because we're not doing the hard work. And I'm not saying the hard work on other people. I mean, it really is the hard work on ourselves. And I think that is the season that I am in. It's like intentional self-care. It is not selfish to say, look, I'm tired. Look, I don't want to do this. It is not selfish to say, look, no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require any explanation. No footnotes are needed. No only means I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to forgive myself or not hold myself in an angry way because I'm not going to deliver, not because I can't, but because I won't. And I think that is something that is different, which is a healthier phase for us, right? I think this is kind of the upswing of all the years we've been going through, that we don't have to be Harriet Tubman anymore, right? We don't have to do that. We actually can say, you know what, I'm going to stop. And in stopping, it doesn't mean I'm giving up. It doesn't mean I'm failing. I'm just going to stop that so I can focus on building me up.
I wholeheartedly agree with the professor. I think what's different here is we are living in a 24-hour news cycle, and we are living on social media. Pew recently did release some research that talked about where Americans read their political news, right? And it is Facebook, Google search, and YouTube. It's reels, it's in sound bites. And so I was sharing with the team today, I have on my phone multiple threads of conversations, right? I have my church girls, I have my Black political girls, and my sorority girls. I have I call it like my brothers, and then I have my Caribbean family, right? They're on WhatsApp. and and they're all having these conversations that wouldn't have been conversations in different parts of our lifespans, right? It is real time digestion of the current news, which can be very taxing mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so how do we pace ourselves? It's not only the Black women who are going through this, it is actually, we are along their journey with Dr. Gay, and like we're all invested because we're watching this. We're watching Fanny live on CNN. And so I think the question becomes, how can we change this moment? What is the work that needs to be done to have the conversation among our colleagues and among our friends and family, but also, how do we call the question? What is the work ahead of us to be able to reshape and shape the narrative about Black women leaders in this moment?
One area where we're seeing that play out so ferociously is in the legal community, both in terms of what's going on with the prosecution of Donald Trump in Georgia on Fani Willis's watch, as well as the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York at the deft hand of Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and the January 6th legal proceeding with Judge Tanya Chutkan. And I have been watching these women in the midst of that whole thing. And there's a part of me that says, yes, girl, go get them. And then there's a part of me that says, good Lord, the pressure they're under to go do their work and do it well. And the whole second guessing that has played out around that. And I'm wondering, Madam State's Attorney, if you would like to elaborate a bit on those pressures, because I don't think that we in the general public who do not understand the law are picking up what it takes to do that kind of work.
Well, it's really tough. And you mentioned some names, and I want to mention some names of some women who I came into this space with when I was elected, who were mentors to me, supporters of me, but who are no longer in this space or soon to be out of this space. Marilyn Mosby was my sister here in Maryland, who was the state's attorney in Baltimore City. You know, Kim Foxx chose not to run again. I don't believe it was because she had nothing more to pursue and to give. It was that it was taking so much out of her to do it. Aramis Ayala down in Florida, who dared to say, I am not going to apply the death penalty in cases that I try because I'm using my discretion. She did not run again because of the tremendous pressure she was under. Monique Worrell, who was essentially removed from office by her governor because, again, she was exercising her discretion. Rachel Rollins, who was just kind of like one of our mentors coming into, this space, and she was very outspoken. There was a whole documentary done. She was called Black Irish. She was Black and Irish. Tremendous U.S. attorney who unfortunately is no longer in that position. And the list unfortunately goes on and on. We represent 1% of all elected prosecutors in this country are Black women. And we know that we have a special responsibility because the justice system is one that has been so unfair to us and our brothers. And in so many ways, we're trying to fight for our own humanity when we are in these positions, not only fighting for those who are wrongfully incarcerated or over incarcerated, but also fighting for our victims too. We want justice too, and trying to figure out how to balance that so that it all makes sense in the context of America. And we get questioned every step of the way. So am I surprised that someone like Bonnie Willis, who is a proud Howard graduate, sharp sister, I had a chance to meet her on maybe 2 or 3 different occasions. And what I can tell you is that she's smart, she is tenacious, and she suffers no fools. And what I saw her doing when she testified, defying probably the advice of her counsel, was she was fighting for her name. She wanted her story to be told. She didn't want it to be painted through other people. And it's so difficult for us as Black women, for people to understand us or to want to understand us. But in this space, in this criminal justice space, we are making a difference, but I would not be truthful with you if I told you that it did not come with a price. It absolutely comes with a price.
I'm glad that you brought that up. If we can, we have a little snippet that we want to play of Fonnie Willis in the moment in court. And I want you to take a look at her face and listen to her words. And let's see if at what you can relate to in the struggle that she is portraying in this moment.
So your office objected to us getting Delta records for flights that you may have taken with Mr. Wade.
No. Look, I object to you getting records. You've been intrusive into people's personal lives. You're confused. You think I'm on trial. These people are on trial for trying to steal an election in 2020. I'm not on trial, no matter how hard you try to put me on trial.
So my question was, do you have any problem?
I object to getting any personal records of mine.
Wow. Now, who's been there? I know this is very law specific, but who all has been there when it comes to having your very reputation questioned and put on the line?
Well, I don't want to overwhelm this section of our conversation, but I can say that we as women, guess what? We are women. We have relationships. We have families, we have feelings, and we also have rights. People don't respect oftentimes the rights of Black women. You don't have to know all my business. I don't owe you everything. She is right. She is not on trial. So all of this information that they think that they want to get from her, they're not entitled to it. They are not entitled to it. And so that's, in my opinion, something that I was very proud of her to stand up and say, is that you are not entitled to try to rip through my life because someone else made a decision to try to steal an election here in this country. I am not on trial. That's what she was saying. That this is not about me. It's about what that person did. And I was very proud of her.
Yeah, I also think what last week's display with Fani Willis demonstrates that they tried to break her credibility on her whole being a whole being, right? At the end of the day, I shared with another media outlet, Sonya, that we've had governors that have had to resign because of personal relationships, including one of my former governors who was accused of bringing a sex worker across state lines with, for extramarital relationship. That at the end of the day, our grandmothers have said this, that we have to dot every I and cross every T, even if our male counterparts don't have to. They questioned her education. So this notion that there's been a rise of Black women who have come from our HBCUs or from our state institutions, that they're questioning where our education credentials have come from. They question many of our elected women and women in our leadership aren't in what is considered either traditional relationships or relationships. So they're questioning how we lead based on who we're dating or who we're married to or who we're not married to. If you want to bring what makes our leadership unique again, is that we do bring our whole selves. But I also think that we've created boundaries that I can bring my whole selves, but you don't need to know everything about me to be able to be a leader. But they're questioning every piece of our lives between 9 to 5 and after 5.
One of the things that stood out to me, and this is before Fani Willis, and I know what I put on my Twitter. I don't know if she's going to win, but I'm rooting for her. Like, I'm just rooting for her because we just need to root for Black women, particularly when they are in a fight for their name, not even for their lives, a fight for their name, because we know in the end, our name is what defines us. Like, that is the first gift we ever received from our parents, and we need to keep our names clean. But I saw when I went down to the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice Sister Ketanji Brown Jackson, like, I saw them coming for her. And that was an indication to me way back then, they are coming for us. And that when we are talking in these highest arenas, they always say, if you're going after the king, you best not miss. Like, when you get into that ring with a Donald Trump or whatever area and arena that you're playing in, we do have to make sure that we are shored up and we are protected, because they will go through every single thing. I am not saying that Fani is the only one who has done this. We know we can give countless white men and women who've done all kind of things, and we can't understand how they're still in office, still walking through, how nothing ever sticks to them. We can start with Donald Trump and work our way all the way down. We just understand, and we can lay out the ways that we have gone from Dr. Claudine Gay, that you can just bring it all the way through to where we were last week with Fani. They are coming for us. When I speak to sisters who are in the profession, one of the things we always check, hey, you got to watch your back. Not just watch my back. Make sure you're watching your own back, because if there's anything they have, they will come if you are considered to be a threat. And I think listening to Sister Braveboy, she's talking about 1% is what you was mentioning in terms of Black women in your field, 2% in my field. What they want is they want to remove us from these fields of battle. If we're down to 1%, they want 0%. 2%, they want to take that to 1%, which means if they have to take us out one by one, there is a growing attack that is being organized by right-wing conservatives, and they are laying down the names of teachers. There's a professor watch list out, and I'm on the watch list, and they're saying, well, these are the professors that need to be eliminated, not just fired, but eliminated. I've gone into spaces where you have to have protection because you're saying, you have put my name, you have put, you've doxed my family, you've doxed my kids, like, you've put everything out and exposed me, and you are nameless and faceless. I think that's something that Sister Carr was saying, that in this world of 24-hour news cycle, the other piece of that is that we are fighting enemies that we can't see. We're all public figures. And as a public figure, you are one click away of knowing where I am at any point during the daytime. You know I'm going to be at the radio station. You know I'm going to be at my institute. You can click and you can find my children. You can find my husband. So when they came after me last fall and they were attacking me, that's what they were doing. They were doxing my family. Like, hey, these are her sons. This is her husband. And I don't know who to fight because they are fighting in the darkness. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they're married to. I don't know where they work, but they have all this information about me. And when I tried to speak to an attorney, one of the things the attorney said, Ada Whitehead, said, look, Dr. Kaye, you are a public figure. Like what exactly are you expecting to do? That this is part of what comes along with that, which made me realize that I need to be even more vigilant about self-care because it's never going to stop. Like it is just relentless. They will not stop until we either quit, retire, move on, they lock us up, they shut us down. It's not going to stop. And the more we get into this very tense environment, because it is growing, it's going to continue. If you dare to step into these arenas, the arenas that we are moving in right now, we know what comes along with that and that it's only going to get worse. So the question is, how much are we willing to give of ourselves? How much do we keep for ourselves? And what does self-care look like? And my last thing is what I often think about, because I was wrestling a lot with the Dr. Claudine Gay, because that's in my area, right? That's academia. Like that's me thinking about the ways in which I move up the scale here. I had to talk to my family, particularly my husband, in December and say, you know what, I just want to be clear. If it gets to that point, I want to know when to walk away. Sometimes like you fight so much that it's a Pyrrhic victory, like you win, but you lost everything in the process. I'm always thinking, Dr. Kaye, you got to know when to walk away for your own sanity, for your own joy, and for your own peace. They can't take everything from you.
But us being us, as Black women, our default mechanism tends to be, I am going to fight back. I am going to stand strong in the face of this. And if we didn't have that going on, would we have made it this far and played such a crucial role in undergirding the very freedoms that everyone in this nation enjoys? So if we were to scale back a bit and say, okay, I got to take care of me, what do we do with the fierceness? Play on words with our partner, fierceforblackwomen.com on this. But what do we do with the natural default to fierceness in the face of these types of adversities?
I think we have to build plans, right? There is the personal plan that Dr. Whitehead talks about, right? Which is having conversation with your family about wins win. Black women tend to put our heads down and we do the work, right? Even those who are considered public figures, right? I think the state's attorney will say, I go to work, I put my head down, I have a plan, but we can't do that now in a vacuum. At the end of the day, these attacks are attached to potential violence. And so this notion of what is your plan in place? At the end of the day, there's this discussion that is happening with Congresswoman Cori Bush, right? There's this ethics violation that she is addressing around the security that she has put into place. That security that she's put into place is now her husband, right? At the time that she hired her security person, they weren't married. This is dis and misinformation. So when you read the articles, it'll say she has an ethics violation because she's using taxpayer dollars and has hired her husband to be her security detail. When in fact, yes, she has an ethics violation that at the end of the day, her and several members of Congress has asked for security details funded by the government. It has been denied that security. There's work to be done, ladies, to ensure that our leaders are safe, that our leaders are having the necessary resources to create plans that will protect them, both physically and verbally.
So we should just continue, in other words, because we expect things to go the way, as Dr. Whitehead so succinctly put it at the beginning of our discussion, all the way back through the ages, that uh, this is what our reality is just going to be. So maybe we don't abandon the fierceness.
Or we
Say we just need to encourage. Like I want to continue to encourage, State's Attorney Braveboy, and for us to lend. Like, what can we do to support individuals? This seems like a systematic piece that systematic problem that we're living in, and that is hard for everyday women and everyday allies to approach. But at the end of the day, we can make a concerted effort to reach out to those who are being fearless, or in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed. How can we support Black women to continue to live in their boldness?
Yeah, and I agree completely with Ms. Carr. There is no way. Look, I am a Leo. I'm just going to be who I'm going to be. I'm not going to change. But what I appreciate are folks like Higher Heights who said, you know what, we understand that Black women in this space need financial support. They need boots on the ground. They need affirmation. We need to build more institutions like this in our community to support the work that we are doing. And they have to be financed. They have to be financed. Some of the most ridiculous positions that are held, and I shouldn't, cast aspersions on, different parties, but let me just say, I am a proud Democrat, okay? But some of the values espoused by another party, let's just say, around women's reproductive rights, around this issue of guns and the need to own whatever kind of gun you want and ammunition up the wazoo, all of that is supported financially by individuals who have a perspective that they want to keep in mainstream America. Black women, we are mainstream America. We control the buying and purchasing power. A lot of organizations and companies actually market to Black women, because Black women, we are consumers. We buy a lot. A lot of the TV shows are designed to attract Black women because we consume a lot of TV. Social media is really dominated in so many ways by people of color, Black and brown, because we use it more than other groups. And so that is power. How do we monetize that power? And then how do we use those resources to support a position that supports us, where we are protected, where our voice is respected. I mean, I think that's where we have to grow to. And groups like Higher Heights, I mean, they are on a cutting edge. They are the example of what we need to see more of in this country.
So more of us putting our money where our mouths and hearts are on the various issues that we juggle. We have just a few more minutes of time, so I wanted to give each of you a moment to summarize what takeaways you feel we need to have, things we need to take away from this discussion that we're having. Any suggested next steps, any thoughts that you would like to leave our audience with tonight?
I think we need to create more spaces like this to express ourselves. I think this has been very therapeutic for me. So I appreciate everyone who was involved in putting this together. I'm grateful to meet or reconnect with some amazing women who I truly respect. We need more of this because we get a lot of the other stuff. But more of this, I think, will feed us in the way we need to be fed. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I think we have to remind ourselves that we are the great-granddaughters of Carrie Lee Dickens, the granddaughters of Marie Mansfield, and the daughters of Dolores Morgan Carr. Those are just the women that fuel my activism and my leadership. And so reminding ourselves every morning that we come from survivors, we come from women who had less than we had, but were able to dream beyond that rainbow. That will help move us in the right direction. But at the end of the day, we need a strategy, that we have a coordinated attack on Black women across sectors, that it's not only having these conversations and creating these platforms to discuss the siege on Black women, but we also need to get in conference rooms, in closed doors, to talk about what a strategy looks like. And that strategy includes organizations like Higher Heights and other organizations that haven't been started. What are the strategy and what is the money needed for Black women to continue to be embossed in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm? And we have to hold our media, our counterparts, our counterparts and others accountable for the way that they treat Black women. And so I look forward to the continued conversation. I look forward to the struggle. I look forward to taking the blueprint from our ancestors and bringing it into a 21st century model so that we can combat Black women, combat these attacks on Black women. I will add that at the end of the day, Black women are not above reproach, that Black women have not, that not every Black woman, like, I don't think anybody is saying that we can't hold Black women accountable. We want to be able to make a distinction between holding Black women accountable and creating a standard that Black women can never reach, that the carrot stick for Black women's leadership continues to move as we continue to advance and soar in our respective fields, and that we need to be very clear that we need a coordinated strategy that is well funded on our end to be able to meet the moment to support Black women to be the best that we can continue to be.
We do a lot of work at the Karson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice, an institute that I founded 4 years ago. We focus on children because I believe that that is the generation I am most concerned about. I don't do much with the silent generation, don't do a lot with the boomers. Gen X, we have very tenacious. Millennials, not sure exactly what they do. I focus my attention on Gen Z and Generation Alpha. And I'm thinking that the work that I do is about educating the next generation, reminding them that they have to be the joy that they seek. They have to be the ones that we have been waiting for. They have to be able to find themselves in the pages. I go into the schools because I think that we have to look at how we can be the barrier, making sure that we protect our children. I think I'm fine. I know exactly, as the daughter of Bonnie Wise, I'm good. I need to make sure that the young people that can't reach out and say, I am the daughter of, I am the granddaughter of, I am the son of, that they are having someone to show up in their life. That's why we do the itty bitty readers every month, and we're reading to children 13 years of age and younger. That's why I'm in, a middle school every Thursday, teaching kids how to be backpack journalists, because it doesn't make sense to me to do all this work out when it really should be for the people who have the kind of heart I have for children. That's who I focus on. I'm like, how can I make sure that we're building up the next generation? Because we are going to need you to be prepared to do the type of work that can actually save this society. My generation, we dropped the baton. We've done a horrible job. We got it from people who dropped the baton. We're not doing a good job of passing it on. So how do we help shore up a generation that came of age during Black Lives Matter, dealt with gun control, dealt with climate issues, and they're still standing up tall in a crooked world? So that's where I focus my attention.
State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy of Prince George's County, Maryland, President Glynda Carr of Higher Heights, and Dr. Kaye Whitehead of the Carson Institute. Thank you so much for this deep, necessary, and meaningful discussion. Over here at Black Women Unmuted, we are taking this as the challenge to continue the conversations and look for the strategies that Glynda, you so eloquently articulated. Many, many thanks to our partner in this discussion, fierceforblackwomen.com. By all means, start the conversations amongst yourselves, with your girlfriends, with your children, with your family, with your significant others, with your friends, and keep talking. On this end, please follow us on social media. Follow everybody here on the socials, and go to our website. And most importantly, stick with us as we proceed to take the sisters off mute, one story at a time.